Good morning out there. Let me know if you can hear me. We are together this morning, January 19th, 2025, for the benefit of the people in the future. And it is a gloomy, foggy winter day, and we have weather coming. So the lighting is what it is. So, and I tell you what, there is nothing like being stuck in the middle of Winter Storm Blair that hit last week, and then having more weird winter weather coming at you than to think about something like X-Men Inferno. Okay, so the Inferno of all things was an X-Men uh, mutant crossover with X Factor and New Mutants and a few other of those Marvel books back in the day. And of course, even though it's considered an X-Men crossover, it actually is more X Factor centric because that is where Cyclops and Jean were, because it's all about the Goblin Queen. Okay, so now if you guys follow me on YouTube, thumb it up, and if you don't, go ahead and thumb it up. If you do follow me, thumb it up. We're going to have a good time this morning because I have all but one issue of Inferno of the crossover issues I found out, right? Thought I had them all. Don't have to track it down. But if you're not subscribed, be like John. John is here. And John is he's subscribed and he hits that bell. So let's hit it in there. Make sure you do that so you know when I do these. You know, it looks like it's going to be Sundays here for a while. Oh, here we go. This was Hallermouse the Accursed saying that we started 5 minutes late. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And we have Paolo here. Good morning. Burn, baby, burn, Disco Inferno. We've come back around to where, like, I'm fine with that. I even like the Bee Gees. So grab a cup of coffee, and I want to show some books and talk about a few things and do my memory because I was collecting these things. Now, if you are subscribed and you saw me postpone one of these shows, we were going to be doing Age of Apocalypse, right? Because it's its 30th anniversary, X-Men Age of Apocalypse. And I had two people that were going to help out on it. Through talking to them and preparing for the show, I found out one was reading Wikipedia, and I found out the other one read like maybe the Alpha and the Omega or something. He read like maybe 2 or 3 issues back in the day, and they wanted to just come on here and do this. And I was like, no, So there are spots open. If anybody would like to do Age of Apocalypse, the storyline is so big. Contact me through Instagram, Hallermouse on Instagram, and we'll talk. Just make sure you've read it at least once. You know, it doesn't have to be every issue, but at least more than what I was getting there. Hey, good morning, John. Yeah. So if you are, Age of Apocalypse, let's go, right? Because I've only read it like twice ever, the Age of Apocalypse, probably in the last 15 years, probably, I think. Thank goodness I have YouTube videos so I can know when I bought those issues I needed and stuff, right? Okay, so what else is going on? What else is going on to talk about? So we started a little bit later this morning because I woke up wide awake at 2:30 and I actually went through these comics and stuff, getting a bit of a refresher. And there's a lot. There are a lot. But basically, and also I actually also looked at a few videos over the years here on YouTube where people talked about Inferno, and I haven't seen any videos from anybody that was actually there collecting these as they came out. That experience, right? I jumped on the X-Men uh, finally, and in around 1985, with the X-Men and Asgardian Wars. Okay, I was real cantankerous. I had a few X-Men. One of the first comics books I read from the stepdad's collection was X-Men #3. And then like sporadic issues throughout his Silver Age collection. A few of everybody heard of Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix hit when I was about 7 or 8. And then, I got a few issues here and there around 83. I was more of a Legion of Superheroes guy. Everybody was really buzzing. I didn't know that many people that collected comics, but the people that I did that were the stepdad's friends, it was all X-Men and Titans and things like that. So I'm so cantankerous, I went the other way. I went like Avengers, Batman the Outsiders, Justice League, team books to get money, and sort of dodged the X-Men. I was sick about hearing them. I was sick about hearing the ads and stuff. And then all of a sudden, Arthur Adams came along, and I jumped on, and I caught up really quick, right? And I was there, right? I was like, oh, they've been right. So I was able to read the X-Men long enough to catch a few things. I had one friend named Jason when I was in fourth grade, now that I think about it. And it was when Rogue, he was a huge Rogue fan. Rogue had made the scene. Okay. So he was G.I. Joe, Team America, if you remember that book, and things like that. So I got to read a little X-Men there around the Paul Smith years, right when John Romita did, sort of flipping through them when we were hanging out at his house. Whoa. Yeah. Okay. So, what was great about Invasion is basically it was a payoff for a lot of people who had followed X-Men throughout the 80s. Jean Grey, as we dawned into the 80s with the X-Men and Inferno and stuff, we jumped into it, and there was Dark Phoenix. Jean Grey was dead. And then about 5 years later, under Jim Shooter's regime there, when he was editor in chief, he always had a thing about you got to tell me the story. Reading editorials, listen to people that were there. Inferno is actually one of the things where I could tell Marvel was changing because of how it ended. As much as I love Inferno and had a good time collecting it and was just like in awe of it, I could tell that Jim Shooter was gone because, and we'll get there. But anyway, basically the X-Men had come along, Jean Grey had died, Cyclops had just had his heart broke. We got things like Days of Future Past and The Brood and Dave Cockrum coming back and making Magneto a sympathetic villain that, and everything like that. And then we had the great Paul Smith years. And it was in those years that we got introduced to Madeline Pryor. All of a sudden, Cyclops is hanging out with his dad and his brother, his dad of the Starjammers, Corsair, and they're in Alaska, and they land at a little airport out in the woods, and out walks Madeline Pryor, who looks exactly like Jean Grey with a bit of a bob cut. And it was like, oh no, and all this shit. So they started stirring that back up. And I think in less than 8 issues, they ended up getting married and they honeymooned. And that's where I popped in as a kid, grabbing a random issue of the X-Men. If you see a video on my YouTube page, it's like the video that is up. There's a story about me buying that X-Men story. And if it's not, it's called Where Little Howler Mouse Bought His Comics, like 1979 to 1990 or something in my hometown. Right. So anyway, there's this big mystery. But then Jim Shooter had always been, if Jean Grey was to come back, I need the story. Chris Claremont did not want her to come back. John Byrne never wanted her to even die. And it ended up being, people don't realize this, Kurt Busiek, Astro Cities, Kurt Busiek, Thunderbolts, Kurt Busiek, Avengers, George Perez, Kurt Busiek. Okay, what else did he do? Red Tornado, Kurt Busiek. Okay, and a few things. Marvel's Kurt Busiek with Alex Ross was the one that came up with the idea that he came up with the way to bring Jean back. Dark Phoenix was never Jean; it was the entity looking like her, and she'd been in a body of water by an airport the whole time when the X-Men crashed in continuity. And so Chris Claremont had just married off Cyclops. He had just had a baby with Madeline Pryor, and now he is going to run off with. He's going to run off because Jean is popped back. She's back, and we get X Factor. So Chris Claremont adapted. Let me see what we got here. Paul Smith had never drawn Jean Grey. Nobody else drew Madeline Pryor until Smith was replaced by John Romita Jr. I saw it and thought, how does Madeline look like Jean? Well, I think I just put it up, but there's a cover. Well, I think issue 175. I need to see who did that cover. I think their mastermind had everybody thinking that either Cyclops or Madeline Pryor, he was casting illusions, messing with people's heads, whatever he was doing, making people think that they were Dark Phoenix. So I need to pop that book open and see if Paul Smith actually drew her, because I knew Paul Smith. Oh, that's after all this. Anyway, train of thought. Thank you, Paolo. I appreciate it, man. My timeline, the issues, it finally clicked, right? So let's bring this up. Let's bring this book up. Let's add them. Let's take a look at what we're looking at, guys. All right, so what we have here right off the bat is I bought this 2 or 3 years ago, right? And this is the Inferno Omnibus, right? Lighting is what it is, guys. It is super dark, foggy, cloudy, musty out there. And I actually have a bunch of lights on. I don't know what's not cutting through it. But this is the Omnibus, right, of Inferno that collects 99% of what Inferno is, right? $36.99 is what I got it for. $125 when it came out. Thank you, Ollies. And I have never opened it. But if we flip it over, you will see the main story. Okay. And they've actually added issues of X Factor to it so that, the story goes on, because there are babies involved. There are babies involved and a lot of stuff going with them. And you can see that it goes through Spider-Man, all 3 books. It goes through Cloak and Dagger, Excalibur, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and by gosh, Power Pack had to get in there, guys. All right. Power Pack is interesting in this, right? Because the 80s had changed, right? So we have that. If you really want to do Inferno, you can kind of track this down if you want to get most of the single issues in dollar boxes. Well, hello, cat. Let me put that back up. At some point, I'm going to have to read that. All right, jumping right in there. There's a few things before I get in here that I don't understand why they want you to really have this. But they've, if you get on there, wow, we're looking all primitive today, aren't we? And it'll have to work. That's what we can do. Yeah. See if that helps. Well, look at that. Yeah, we'll just leave that there. We lost the light. We have lost the light. But anyway, so for some reason, they want you to track down. This is going to be horrible today. I'm going to have to adjust or something. Let me try this, guys. We are live. These things happen. Let me try this. Put a little angle on there. Like a third world country. So for some reason, they want you to track down this Marvel Fanfare number 40. Dave Mazzucchelli doing an Angel story, and it's got a backup with P. Craig Hamilton. Well, no, not that Hamilton. It's a different Hamilton. Beautiful artwork back here in the backup feature that is better than the main feature. But it is, Craig Hamilton with Chris Claremont. And this has some absolutely beautiful art, and it's a storm. Now, the thing that I find interesting about them trying to say that this book is necessary, it's not. I'm not real sure why they want to include this, but it kind of lets you know where everybody is at in the X-Men at the time. The problem with Marvel Fanfare is a lot of these stories, most of them were in the shelf. They were in a drawer somewhere in case they ever need a backup feature. And some never saw the light of day. They want you to get those. Another thing you can get that's not in an omnibus is What If Volume 2, number 6. It's a What If X-Men Lost Inferno? What If the Goblin Queen in Sim 1? Okay. And it's starring Doctor Strange, right? Terry Austin cover there. It's fantastic stuff. So let me know if you can see this stuff, guys. All right. Now, before we get in there, there's things I was trying to talk about where there's a lot of payoff if you were an X-Men fan at the time, right? So basically, you need to go back to the 80s there, the early 80s with Khazar. Just to kind of get a little background, you need Khazar the Savage, number 11 and 12. Okay. I thought they all had wraparound covers, but not at this point, or maybe they got through with them, right? And you get a little bit of story about Belasco. Belasco is at the Savage Land, and he tries to sort of do a thing where he merges 2 dimensions, I think, our Earth with that of the Dark Gods. And he gets punished and thrown into a limbo. Okay, that's Belasco, Khazar the Savage. And we see Belasco pop back up a few years later in issue 160 of the Uncanny X-Men. And in this issue, we see Belasco return. He explains what he did for a brief panel. And he brings in and he kidnaps Elena. That is Cyclops' little sister, who's a child in this, right? And she's in limbo. She sees other versions of the X-Men in limbo that have been corrupted by Belasco or working for Belasco. And they go in and they try to save her, and we see some of the first things that makes Elenia become magic and such a cool character. The armor, the soul sword, Sim, the demon that will pop up, and all the demons that are there. So this is issue 160, and this is the issue that when I was looking around YouTube when I couldn't sleep and insomnia hit, this is the issue I saw a few people who apparently had never, they acted like they had never read X-Men the World went, this was, they had a great discovery. Like, sorry kids, but this has been around for over 40 years. But yeah, they were like, oh my God, this is really where it lays the seeds for Inferno years later, like in 83, I think. It's a great little issue, and it leads into Magic, the 4-issue miniseries by Chris Claremont and John Buscema. I think Tom, no, I don't want to say it was Palmer. I'm pretty sure, well, maybe it was Tom Palmer that did this, right? Because this miniseries is very cool. There is a panel where Belasco or Sim pops up, and through a dimensional rift, a little circle, if you will, a sphere, a hand pops up, grabs Elenia, and pulls her down. And Kitty Pryde jumps up and grabs her and is trying to pull her back. And then all the X-Men pop up and they're like, let's get her out. And in between panels, years went by. When they pull out little Elenia, she's now a teenager. She spent years living in limbo. And this is the miniseries that tells you what happened and what limbo is and who our cast of characters are. And like I said, there are X-Men in there. It's all about time, alternate timelines, alternate dimensions. And we get to see, I mean, it's a very cool concept. We're going to have this all happen in the X-Men, but you'll need to buy 4 issues to see what happened in all those missing years that happened in between the panels. All right, and then we pop up just a few months later to issue 168. This is the famous book where you open up the book and Kitty Pryde is yelling, Professor Xavier, you are a jerk. And on the last page, we see Elenia. Okay, not Elenia, excuse me, Madeline Pryor. Because Inferno is mostly, if you want to see the book, Professor Xavier is a joke. Looks like a recruitment poster. Paul Smith. And here it is. This is the page that just had everybody who was an X-Men fan and been reading the X-Men supposedly drop their mouths. It's like, it looks like Jean. Right there it is. Now, if I was Marvel, I would have said something like about hitting the jackpot. You know what I mean? Whenever you debut a ginger or redhead in the Marvel universe, it should be, that's what it should be, hitting the jackpot. Because of the Mary Jane things for you muggles out there, right? Here we go. Paolo, in many cases, it was the hair that made it possible to identify the characters. I can see it. All right, we're good to go then, right? So, there's a little background before you jump in there to Inferno, the few little books, if you want to run across them in dollar boxes and whatnot. If they're still out there in dollar boxes, if you actually want to pick up some of these trades, they have 2 hardback trades that make up the same as the omnibus, if I remember correctly. One is the actual X-Men issues. It's in a hardback, and then they came out with a volume 2 of Inferno where it was the crossovers. Okay. So anyway, to get into the main story, and there is a reading order. That's what I noticed with everybody talking in YouTube and stuff. There's things I just assume people know sometimes, and I kind of forget they don't because of the era and time we live in all the time that has gone by. When this came out in 1988, as I've said, I turned 15 in 8 months while this was going on. This started early in 1988, earlier than expected, and it ran through 1989. Wait a minute, yeah, 89. So this actually started in 88. And if you read a lot of things online, they'll say it was 1989. But I was going through a couple stages of life. I got my learner's permit I was more maturely dating, if that makes any sense, in a few things, and I was getting a bit more critical. You know what I mean? And there were things I absolutely loved about this, and there was things I did not like. You know, if I'd been like 10, 11, 12, 13 reading this, everything would have been cool. But this is actually one of my all-time favorite issues of a comic. Exterminators #1. It's a 4-issue series. What happens is we're going to call him Bob, right? But his name, as you can see, is Nastra. And some people said you say that nastier is how you say that. And I actually Googled this before when I found out there was a Google translation, and it was Nastra. It was very literal. So we're going to call him Bob, right? But this issue is a 4-issue miniseries where we had a few of our teen X Factor recruits running around. Boom Boom, Skids. Can't remember this guy, man. This guy was actually, you kind of expected him to go places. Richter. And then we got a new character called Whiz Kid because, you know, he's in a wheelchair. And he's kind of like Forge. You might want to get a DNA test to see if Forge is your daddy, but he's got a connection to technology. He can make things by touching them and have computers and things talk to him. So what happens is Nasty decides, yeah, Nasty's better than Bob. We'll go with Nasty. Old Nasty here decides it's time. It is time. And I got to tell you, John Bogdanov, and Louise Simonson did this, but this is some of the most fantastic art I have seen at the time. I absolutely loved this. I wasn't real familiar with John's work here. These guys would go on to the 90s and end up doing Superman on their own book for a while. They were involved in this as Superman, but look how heavy this is, right? This first issue, and Al Williamson is inking. That's the difference. Al Milgrom picks up after this, but Al Williamson, the legend, is inking this. It is dark. It is heavy. It's got an EC Comics feel, and Al Williamson worked at EC Comics, Invasion of the Baby Snatchers. To get Inferno to go, they have to capture 13 babies, cast a spell, and I think the babies are supposed to die. Okay, but I love the artwork in this issue, just this one issue. Everything that's in it, everything is heavy. Everything is dark. It's very Wally Wood influenced. And we have Sim. Now, if you don't know Sim is a demon here that popped up, right? And I think his first issue was that 160 or whatever it was I showed a minute ago. But anyway, Sim was Chris Claremont's rib back at Dave Sim from Cerebus. Okay. Basically, we had the Roach in Cerebus, and he would do satire and parodies of whatever character was hot at the time. They did Sandman, Punisher, Wolverine. He started out as Moon Roach, as Moon Knight, because they were pretty hot. And they said they told him to quit, and he was protected. He just moved on to other characters. And then, so they came up. Chris Claremont was like, all right, do you want to do Wolverine? I'll give you, make a character of Cerebus and you, and they named him Sim. So, yeah, they're fighting and all this stuff. But anyway, they entered the world to start kidnapping babies, a la Labyrinth, Goblin King, Goblin Queen, if you will. And they ended up in a cemetery. And this is so cool, man, because there's Gaines, you know, the guy who actually looks there. I drew this Dirty Nasty Hippie so much. I absolutely loved when I saw this. And they chase him around. And somewhere there is a cemetery plot. Oh, my goodness. There it is. Yeah, of Wortham, the guy that did Seduction of the Innocent. But yeah, this is so EC influenced. Got a cat crying in there. Yeah, this is so EC Comics influenced, and the artwork is just so retro that I absolutely love it. But we get our basic plot. The exterminators are all hanging out, and it's going to be up to these kids to stop things. There's a lot of lightness and satire going to it. And I want you to notice that Bob Harris is the editor, and Tom DeFalco is now the editor-in-chief. And I do believe that made a difference. Tom DeFalco, I feel like, is letting people kind of cut loose a little bit, a little loose, a little sloppy. And then he feels more of a hands-off approach, where Jim Shooter wanted the stories to make sense. So there's a lot of cracks here and stuff, right? But we get a lot of Buffy talk and stuff like that, a lot of rich kids and things that's going on because the kids are all growing up. But anyway, they're out there trying to stop the goblins from getting the babies. And in the midst of this, they meet this one kid who becomes a whiz kid, and he ends up making computers. He's a mutant, of course, a little scientist, and he ends up deciding to kind of become a superhero. He's able to, I mean, it's very 80s. You know, you had the Transformers, you had a lot of manga coming over there and GoBots and stuff. Well, here's a kid that can just make uh, anything. It's always red. He can just make explorers. He reminds me of the movie Explorers, like he'd be one of those kids. But anyway, they all end up forming a team, those 80s kids, you know what I mean? And it's got the military in it and everything like that. But these are worth reading. But they're going to go off and they're going to try to save the world from the demon invasion, and they end up trying to save the babies. And Whiz Kid actually ends up being kidnapped. Oh, you need to get a new #1. This mine's beat up. But Whiz Kid ends up getting kidnapped by the demons. He makes a computer. And they start mixing technology with magic, and the computer actually ends up speeding up spells and things to where this invasion can go full blown, because by using what the Whiz Kid makes with his computers, it makes the spells faster, more efficient, and easier to use. And that will play back on what's going on. Like I said, there's a lot of moving parts here, right? So officially, we have the corruption of Madeline Pryor into the Goblin Queen as the spells are cast, and New York starts having everything go anthropomorphic. Anyway, everything ends up coming alive, like a Ralph Bakshi cartoon is what it reminded me of, guys. So basically what happens is that as New Yorkers are just starting to go to work, the elevator seems to act like it's actually trying to eat them. Like, you know, the cars seem to be trying to run them over. Garbage cans try to like take their hand off or spit the trash back at them, right? It started out as hell on earth. New York was turning into limbo hell, if you will. And everybody starts getting really hot because there's a heat wave all of a sudden. And eventually these things start getting faces and teeth and things. And people are going about their business. They're riding buses, going to work, while the bus is, filled with goblins and demons and things, right? And in the midst of this, the Goblin King, the tone of these stories from book to book really switches around and changes. Okay. Really switches around and changes. Some people take it more serious. Some people go full comedy with it. And eventually it really ended up feeling like a cartoon in certain places. And I feel like that's the editorial, right? But anyway, Chris Claremont adapted is basically what he did. He adapted to the changes of having Jean Grey come back. I don't know what his plans with Madeline Pryor was, but he had him get married and everything pretty quick. So he adapted, and we ended up getting a clone story. Mr. Sinister ends up being a super geneticist, and he's been behind everything, is what we come to find out. He's been behind everything that's happened to Scott Summers and the Summers family, all the way back to them getting split up, put in orphanages, and then all of a sudden, you know, Madeline Pryor is a clone of Jean. And right there, I'm like, oh, God. You know, but anyway, she gets a hot, sexy suit by Mark Silvestre. She's, of course, she has to go nuts since Scott abandoned her and the baby. And she reaches a point where she's willing to sacrifice their baby Cable, if you will. At one point, she's willing to do it. And I got to tell you, man, the artwork was fantastic in this. Absolutely loved it. Here's what I'm talking about with the elevator. Here's a kid just sitting there listening to his Walkman. You remember Walkmans, guys? And some people are on an elevator, and all of a sudden it goes bam, it shuts up. We back up. We see that the wall has a face. The elevator is its mouth, and there's blood coming out of it. And since our kid has a Walkman and he's just doing his job, nobody sees it, because he just, you know, he's able to just do his job, sweep it up, and dance off. He's grooving to Disco Inferno, probably, right? No, actually, 1988 is probably Poison. Anyway, we get to see Mr. Sinister and his little plots and stuff. We have a new, you know, it's not Apocalypse, it's not Magneto, but he has the Marauders. So we're going back to more like Massacre, where it was the Marauders in 1986 killing all the Morlocks, if you know your X-Men stuff, right? And he's using them as bait. He's going to sacrifice them all to get things done, because the X-Men are hanging out in Australia and they're invisible at this point in time. thanks to the Seeds Perilous of Follow the Mutants. The crossover from before this, nobody can see them, and they're down here like getting clothes and going to the malls, and just can't stand being in isolation. So anyway, they got to set up the whole story, and we got all this stuff going on. Anyway, to move on and stuff, but they had some of the greatest, absolute. I thought these were fantastic advertisements for Inferno. They had one for X Factor with Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor. Here's one with Elenia. I'm trying to think what they had for the actual X-Men, but we'll pop up in it. But anyway, that's the setup issue, right? And that book goes hot back and forth over the years and stuff, right? I usually have 2 or 3 of them. But anyway, it runs through X-Men, and the thing that really was blowing people away and what I was waiting on, my payoff, is that we finally had the X-Men and the X Factor meeting properly. This is the 3rd mutant crossover that become a tradition, and it was actually having an effect on the books, in my opinion, right? The sequential storytelling. It felt like to me you would get 6 good issues of X-Men stories and 6 good issues of X Factor stories, and then you could tell they were starting to set up for the next crossover event. Somewhere on YouTube, there's a reunion video. Somebody did a live show, much like I'm doing now, and they had Chris Claremont and Nisita, and I think 2 other people. I swear I'm pretty sure it was last year because I watched it. But the only thing I remember about it is Chris Claremont saying that these crossovers were a mistake. Even though they were making money and stuff, they were a mistake. And this is the one where I started seeing it. It was the Justice League, Justice Society all over again, right? It was slowing down what comics were right before this, where you could get 12 good issues. All of a sudden, it's more like it was getting cut in half so we can make sure we crossed over, of your favorite character there. So anyway, Mark Silvestre comes in here, and we had the plot going on. We have New York going crazy. You're going to see I have multiple issues of these because I'm always looking for upgrades. Mine are beat up that I have. When I sold my comic book collection of X-Men back in '93, I kept a few strands here and there, things I absolutely loved. But part the first right here, X-Men 240 is where Inferno officially starts. And there is a reading order, and that was the magic of this one, right? So we have, all this dancing going on and all these characters, and people are starting to act funny. They're saying things like, you got the luck of the devil. Chris Claremont is just setting a mood and everything. And we got more people going into that demon-infested elevator. And they're fighting demons, but nobody notices. But they keep the tone down. And I guess this is Havoc, putting the moves on his sister-in-law, I guess. I don't remember. But anyway, as spells are cast, we see that she's gone evil. And, she's not the Black Queen, but she is now the Goblin Queen. And she is nuts. And, she meets with Old Nasty there in the same cemetery they were with the X-Terminators, and things get going. And then everything else is just trying to have reasons for the X-Men to be sexy out in the Australian outback, because they're just roller skating for no reason in bikinis, flesh-colored bikinis and things, hanging out with Longshot. And we got to get them all back to New York. The Marauders are coming out. They're more or less used to bait out the X-Men. And now we're getting, like I said, threads tied up during the 80s. And there's a lot of hanging threads that Chris Claremont put out there. And some were never resolved before he left the book. But this one, we get the Morlocks. We're going to get the answer to Madeline Pryor. We're going to get the answer of Mr. Sinister and Scott and Magic and Elenia. Right? So I'm getting 240, 241, a son of the Goblin Queen. And then finally, the originals are back. This was what I was waiting on. A giant size spectacular where the X-Men have been enchanted, if you will, with all the spells and everything. And that's our excuse to have the the original X-Men fight the current X-Men. This was what I was waiting on, guys. Let me get this open. Yeah, this is what I was waiting on, because we had Archangel. They had done changes during Follow the Mutants. To where we had a more badass Angel. I got what they were doing, but I quickly missed the original Angel there and stuff, right? So we finally had our reason. As soon as Wolverine saw Jean, this was the cliffhanger in probably an X Factor book or something, right? Yep, Inferno Part the Third in this book. So we have old Logan losing it because of his super senses and his love of Jean and how she was dead all these years. Just grabs her and kisses her in front of everybody in the cemetery. And we get it. There's a lot of catch up here. Claremont was wordy, but we finally have everybody together. Even Madeline Pryor's there, looking all, victim like. Making sure she looks all victim like. No, I'm not the Goblin Queen. Don't suspect anything. And of course, Jean. It takes 2 pages for her to smack him off because Jean's been dead. He's thought he smelled her scent going back to Morlock Massacre or something, right? A scent that it couldn't have been there. And this was what was getting me. We finally had Angel versus Wolverine, and now he can just throw them daggers, even though those daggers look like the exact same ones that Longshot throws around, but his feathers are daggers. And of course, we have Rogue being Rogue. She kisses him also, very sexual. And she's able to take him in and feel his essence and memories. And there's Apocalypse waning there. He has Apocalypse DNA in him. So yeah, this is what I was waiting on. I was like, here we go. We got an evil Longshot going on with his luck powers, brother versus brother. And then we've got all this, it's supposed to be hell and stuff, but man, it's getting cartoony now. It's getting kind of funny. Right. So I feel like we're going full blown Muppets with some of this stuff, right? I absolutely dug it. I actually liked it. I never saw anything like this, didn't know where it was going, knew that a few things were paying off. Getting a lot of evil Goblin Queen. Talking old nasty here. So what's happened by this point, you'll see that he's gone from green to red. They took in the technovirus that Warlock has. We'll get there, guys. We'll get there. They mix a lot of a technovirus that Warlock of the New Mutants, because he's an alien from his planet. And what it does is it kind of turns you into a techno-organic being. So now the demons who are running this thing are becoming more and more powerful as New York becomes more and more like hell. And they have towers and they're going to take over. I'm not going to tell you what happened to the babies, the 13 babies that made this possible. But here we go. This is where I was like, oh no. They start ripping it up as the X-Men start winning. If you know Lar Freeze from Green Lantern, the Orange Lantern, So Selfish, this is what I thought of when I saw him, for the first time. But yeah, they started really lightening the tone so the X-Men can win. They win. They take him out. That's okay because it's still not over, because the Goblin Queen makes her move and she's with Sim and she reveals herself and you're like, oh shit. And this takes over in X Factor. I'm doing this a lot by memory, guys. A lot of people seem to just be fine with me, like looking at these issues and gushing to remember when I saw them, right? We got a lot of great art going on, a lot of little back and forth. They were having fun with this, but like I said, the tone did not stay consistent in it. If you're going to have hell on earth, I feel like the stakes should be higher and everybody be flipping out, So let me get some of this put up. Yeah, but I end up buying these every time I see them in, I'm being critical, but I buy them every time I see them in dollar bins, right? What we got here? So much Mark Silvestre. Yeah, not Dave Finch, people. Mark Silvestre. Morning, all. Brian LCS is here. Good morning. And we got Victor Shade. Good morning. Here we go. Brian LCS. Where did Paolo go? Oh, it moved. I'm getting more and more comments. You guys, yeah, bring on the comments, guys. There we go. All right, Paolo is all over this. Wheezy and Bogdanov, and I know I'm killing that name. Later did a Death of Superman parody where Mixiez Pitlick dies. I have that somewhere. I'm pretty sure. Bogdanov is a cartoonist primarily. He's always seemed very influenced by Will Eisner. Yeah, I really dig his stuff. Ironically, I didn't really dig his Superman stuff. It's all the stuff that I've seen like that and in Power Pack and stuff. WizKid is sort of a super Forge. Unlike WizKid, Forge actually has to have a screwdriver. Yeah, he has the tools and he has the little packs and stuff. It cracks me up because they made him look like he was a 60s Japanese character in one of their TV shows with kids, like Space Giants or something like that, with that big helmet, Jim, if you know what I'm talking about. We got here so much Mark Silvestri. Yeah, Mark Silvestri was, I mean, killing it. I really liked him on the X-Men. I might have liked him a little bit more than Jim Lee, to be honest, but Jim Lee wasn't really on X-Men as long as people think. Oh, Gore, good morning, sir. Morning, Tim. Agree with Claremont. I did not like crossovers and events with the notable exception of Crisis on Infinite Earths. I did not like it when I saw the Inferno previews. To see, now, that's what I'm saying. This was the crossover event where I was starting to have enough. This is the one where I'm like, here we go. Because the year before this, they had Follow the Mutants, and I didn't cover that one because all those books were actually kind of separate. Nobody really crossed over. There's no real reading order except as they come off the stands and stuff, right? This is one where they actually crossed it over, and I could see how it interfered with the storytelling in from month to month. We were getting 6 issues of story building in half, and then the rest was building up to this and then taking over for a year. You have to read in another language 3 years after the fact. Gore, the foreign publisher, know how to make the stories feel integrated. 100-page anthologies help. That's hilarious, right? So anyway, get this glare off here. I'm going to have to situate this sooner or later. Okay. Oh, okay. Now it's brightening up. The fog outside is lifting, and as soon as I say that, it went away. Okay, so as you can see, I buy these whenever I can. I have multiple issues. One more here. We'll look at one more, the last issue here, apparently, of Inferno, of Sinister Triumphant. Did I do these out of order? I don't think so. And we get into the New Mutants. So anyways, whoops, some things happen in X Factor, as you can see. And we get more or less of a prologue. Hilary Barta is doing the guest inker. Great inks by that person, right? But anyway, now, and once again, it's like a false finish. This is like Return of the Kings, the movie, guys. Every time you think they beat the bad guy, another one pops up. So they took down old Nasty and the Goblin Queen popped up. They thought they took down the Goblin Queen and old Mr. Sinister pops up. And at some point, Sim will pop up. So, yeah, we get memories and we find out the true origin of Madeline Pryor and Cyclops, I do believe. This is where we find out Mr. Sinister has been behind everything going on with the family. And he's much older than he lets on. And we see just all sorts of stuff here. Psychic plane. Like I said, the thing about reviewing a Claremont book is there's so much that goes on, so much talking, and so many threads over the years. You just need to immerse yourself on it, right? So we're back on the ship. There's evil eyes about in the shadows. Still setting here, setting up more and more story. And if you don't know the X Factor at the time, they actually had a ship that was the size of a city that was actually sentient, and it was an alien. So this happened way before the Authority, guys. The Authority with their ship, if you will, okay, that they got. But anyway, we just got more villains, more mutants, X-Men. Everybody's working together because they have a common enemy. It is of its era and stuff, right? And then I'm not sure what happened here. This is interesting. To be concluded in X Factor 39, Dust to Dust. I completely forgot about this panel, but the last man standing, because one of the Marauders survived Malice. She possesses people. She's more or less an energy being. But Mr. Sinister has popped up. He and Malice, who has Magneto's powers, has taken down everybody. And the last man standing apparently is Longshot. And of course, we got to have that. Jean Grey's got to be in the picture there. But I love this, man. Yeah. Only if you kill me first. Longshot, is it? You wish X-Man is our command and our pleasure. To be concluded in X Factor 39, Dust to Dust. And in X-Men 245, something completely different. So, of course, this is going to have a big bow tied on it. That's what that told me. I actually remember reading that. So, like I said, there's a reading order. I'm not taking you through the reading order. You'll get the gist. We're all big boys here. But this really should have been more, in my opinion, about Elenia. I know Jean Grey and the Dark Phoenix is what pulled everybody in, but this was the story of Elenia, because over the years, she was always fighting her dark side. And every time she used a soul sword and she ended up striking someone, she would get a magic piece of armor on her. Great Sienkiewicz art, right? And this has been building for years. 5 years or so. and they end up messing with Sim because Sim popped up in the New Mutants more and more. And by the time we pick up the New Mutants in Limbo, they are you'll see Sim, and you see that the technophage virus is going through there, an alien virus that turns you into, uh, you know, a mechanical person, whatever here. But I can't remember exactly what goes down, but she's full in armor. She Magic has the hooves of a demon, the eyes and horns of a demon, if you will, and she's completely in that magical armor with her soul sword. This has been building for years, and we finally get to see it. So basically what happens is they go into limbo to take over, to take care of everything and get all these people, and Elenia will end up sacrificing herself because she will, to make Inferno stop happening, she will follow the demons and everybody into limbo at some point, and she will throw the sword in after her to where she cannot get back out. You have to have the sword to rule limbo, and that's what everybody is after here. And she's almost completely embraced her dark side, but she redeems herself by, like I said, trapping herself in limbo at some point as the X-Men watch her get darker and darker. Great Brett Blevins art in this. Al Williamson doing the inking. But anyway, like I said, a lot of great visuals throughout this, very dark. And when I get to Power Pack, I'll talk about the darkness. I'll do an actual tone of the comics and of the era from being there. But as they talk, they recap about how she was a little girl when she went into limbo and all those years she lost with her family and how she came back. We get to see that even the demons have possessed. They're on the Empire State Building, and you can get the telescopes, and they're eating eyeballs when people get in there. And like I said, part of the spells, everybody's going about their business. Nobody's running and hiding and freaking out. And a lot of moving parts. They're all in here. Let's get to the good stuff here. Yeah, full blown coming out. She ends up fighting Sim, who gets a hold of the sword. Elenia fights him. This fight's been building for years. And when she possesses the sword, she can feel the power, and she becomes the Dark Child. It finally happened. I am power. And she transports everybody back to an Inferno-infested New York. And there's Warlock, able to shapeshift because he's a technophage being. So yeah, Inferno's happening. Manhattan is transformed. Inferno is here. So thanks to her not being able to do that. So you kind of get the idea. But basically, like I said, she ends up sacrificing herself. But there will be a bit of a happy ending, if you will, because Colossus comes in, sees his sister, fights the demons. Sim is one again. Like I said, Nasty is involved more or less with the X-Men. Sim is involved with the Mutants. And Mr. Sinister is more in X Factor. But Colossus is just running around, breaking necks, killing things. There's a lot of death in this. They kill a lot of demons. Oh my God, let me get to the point here. So anyway, a lot of Elenia talk, a lot of her destiny and limbo and facing off against these people, a lot of build-up for years and years, as I keep saying. Kind of gets drawn out a little bit. She sacrifices herself to stop Inferno, or so she thinks. There goes the soul sword, and the door closes behind her. And they think she's dead because they find nothing but a husk of her armor after all this is done. Everybody's crying. And then all of a sudden, Cyclops goes to pick up the husk of a corpse. And Elenia gets her childhood back. She's back to being whatever it was, 8 or 5 years old. There you go. So now somebody has to possess that soul sword, but it's still not over because we've already seen that. Like I said, more endings than Return of the King. So in the midst of all this, things have reverted back to the way they were 5 years ago. Everybody else is older, but she's not. All right, let's take a look at what we got here. Victor Shade. I was out of comics for the first time when this came out. I read them after the fact and was surprised to learn they brought back Jean Grey, which was a mistake in my opinion. Yeah, isn't that amazing how that's still talked about? that's the state of modern comics, guys. In the last couple of years, we're talking about stories that came out 45 years ago, 40 years ago now. A lot more should have happened in between all that. Maybe Paolo, but I don't like events interfering with ongoing titles. And it's like uninvited guests crashing a family gathering. And now we must deal with the drama of our families weren't enough. Team is making the Inferno interesting. If I find Omni for cheap, I'm likely to get it. It is, like I said, I had a good time with it, but I was also 15 when it started and I was 16 when it ended. And I could definitely tell, like, this was the one where I could tell Marvel was changing. I just didn't know into what. And it's real interesting because right around the corner, we were getting things like Sandman coming. People were discovering Alan Moore a bit more, a Killing Joke like we talked about and things like that. Okay, guys. So now we get to the X Factor issues, right? And I got to tell you, Louise Simonson, Walt Simonson, this is very gene-centric, right? This is the meat, if I remember right. I'm going to be moving pretty quick through these, right? Because some of these were just fantastic, right? So we've had our three or four endings, right? So this should be the ones where it's the Goblin Queen, Mr. Sinister. I can't remember if Sim pops back up, but this is the one where we finally get some resolution. Okay, we know, they find out about the they resolve. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Even the baby carriages are trying to kill little Calvin and Hobbes here. If you look real close, this is what I'm saying. The tone was so weird in this. Everything went anthropomorphic. They're supposed to be demons. This is supposed to be hell on earth. The spell has people living their lives like normal. Meanwhile, they're getting eaten and stuff, and they keep throwing in like little cutesy things like this. Yeah, that's Calvin and Hobbes right off the bat. And I was just sort of like chuckling at first, transformations and everything like that. But anyway, the artwork, this is Walt Simonson. There's a lot of storytelling going on, but the Beast has just returned to his furry state at this point. They give you a lot of exposition, what's going on with New York. And this is what I'm talking about, the tone being weird. But anyway, to get to the meat of the matter, let me see what goes on in this and stuff, right? But it's like I said, they're fighting subways. They're trying to save people. Subway turns into a Leviathan that's on a bridge. And like I said, with Walt Simonson's intricate artwork, you're better just trying to pick this up yourself if you ever read any of his X-Men stuff. This is not his Thor stuff, guys. He throws it all in there. Yeah, Bob Wiacek is doing the art, the inking, which I think might be a part of it. But anyway, the 13 babies end up making a pentagram in the sky. And the demons are released. That's why I'm saying there's a reading order to all this. But like I said, the basic thing is this is just setting up the demons that are coming, pulling everybody in. They've had an excuse to get the X-Men in with the Marauders that got sacrificed. I'm pretty sure the X-Men actually got possessed, or they did it and they killed a lot of the Marauders. And then, like I said, by the time we get to another section of X Factor here, there's no telling we're in the fight, but we're in the big double-page spread because you had to have those. Walt Simonson loved Kirby from the first day that he ever saw them. And yeah, we get Nasty here, old Nasty with the technophage virus in him and the WizKid computer speeding up the spells and everything, right? He might have actually made himself part of that computer. But anyway, he's got a baby. He's got the baby of Madeline Pryor, a clone Jean Grey, and Cyclops, and that baby grows up to be Cable, guys. So Cable, from the get-go, is getting traumatized worse than Johnny Quest. And the Goblin Queen gets a hold of him. And she is that, by this point, so freaking insane. And so evil. A latch-ditch effort. That's a wave of demons coming. That she is willing to sacrifice her own baby now to win. And like I said, Jean is now redeemed and stuff. She's not a homewrecker. She's the one that ends up, trying to save little baby Nate there, little baby Cable. And usually, there's a little bit more depth with this. Like I could say that this was a story of something, the subtext. No, this is pretty straightforward. Yeah. Oh, man. And like I said, there's two more here, man. So we're going to be moving on. But we get a giant size spectacular. A lot of these ended up being double sized because there was so much story to tell. But here we are, man. Walt Simonson. Now we have Al Milgrom. Al Milgrom because he's fast. You know, Duet. We have it. We got and it's a lot of exposition of this one. A lot of flashes to what's going on with other books where they were fighting the X-Men in between all of this. In case you didn't get those books, but they kept it tight. They kept it pretty tight. The evil X-Men that are possessed. We get all the answers we need to who Madeline Pryor is when they mold binds. It's a lot of catch up and a lot of just flat out answering questions for you. Of course, baby Nate ends up being just fine, but he ends up crying because he lost Madeline, Jean, Madeline, Nate, my son. He's so torn. Old Slim Summers is just so torn over those ties. X-Men and X-Factor confront Mr. Sinister, and then this is where everybody's just all together. They go out for an all-out war, and this is kind of fun stuff. We're actually about done with the main story, guys. But my copy is beat up all to hell. I mean, I read this over and over. I completely enjoyed it. So we pick up where I said at the end of that X-Men, where it was Longshot was the last man standing. All the X-Men are scattered around. And this is where it just blew my mind. When you got the X-Men all around, just go ahead and finish them off. You know what I mean? Like, this is where I was starting to be a little bit more logical in my storytelling. Like, okay, they're dead. The Beast pops up. Cyclops pop up. The X-Men may be down, but you got the X-Factor around the corner. You know what I mean? So they come in. And it's just one big brawl with Mr. Sinister and monologuing a lot of things that he does. Psylocke, because everybody loves her in her D&D gear, back in her Dungeons and Dragons gear before she switched races. Oh man. But anyway, yeah, one big fight, big explosion. Cyclops ends up killing Mr. Sinister, blowing him away, unleashing that optic blast, So yeah, a lot of trying to redeem them. And then all of a sudden, we get the pose. Everybody goes their own ways and they're on a pose, right? Yeah, Nanny, and then the books pick up right when they're on. Now, this is what killed me about Marvel. All right, what I'm about to show you. Now you're going to get a little bit of a rant here. All right, let me come up here. Okay. All right. So now this is where, with this issue, there's a backup story here, right? This is X-Factor Annual number 4. This is a great annual. You know what I mean? It's got Walt Simonson, John Byrne, a lot of John Byrne art in this, right? He's returned to Marvel from DC for about a year or so, or something like that. And they're pulling him back in. We're getting a little taste of the man who made those classic X-Men issues, right? But this is where I was like getting a little pissed. And this is where years later, I would find better terminology than what I was coming with, but this is where we would see the illusion of change. But because this is what kills me about the last 20 years of Marvel, where you've really seen it, right? So basically, you've had New York transformed, right? And demons and people getting eaten, and you saw the blood and everything, right? And then all of a sudden, we're going to find out that everything goes right back to the way it was, and these books pick up right where they left off. And how is that possible? Well, this book has a little backup feature that a lot of people did not know was in it. And I think it's Mark Grunwald writing it, Jim Fern drawing it. I'm going to show it, right? But this blew my mind because this should have had like long-lasting effects. New York was completely transformed. It got turned into hell on earth. Elenia is back. Everything. This was, okay, it turns out nobody remembers it. Nobody believes that it happened. And that seems to be a staple of the Marvel Universe. This is where I realize you can read a lot of their books for years and years and years, and they reset. They reset back to where they were at some point. Wait till I show you this. They did it really well, though. Like, I enjoyed how they did it. They're going to break that news to me. Walt Simonson never disappoints. I've met him 2 or 3 times. Jared Osborne is actual friends with him. He does a barbecue once a year, if I remember. And Let's see what else we got. He's a nice guy. I was really glad to meet him. Silvestri made everything overly dramatic in the X-Men parts. Simonson gave us a sense of urgency in the X-Factor segments. There's a lot of story packed in this. That's one of the reasons I liked it. When you're going from month to month to month following this, you got your money's worth. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. At the time, I thought it was great comics, but I was growing up. I was, reading things like Mark Twain, Letters from the Earth. I think I was starting to pick up a little bit more. I'd always been reading, but I was starting able to. Had read enough to where I was able to say why I didn't like things, point out things. After all that, the X-Men needed to pop in a Kmart and pick up some cheap clothes. Yeah. I mean, they're all, you have in Star Trek, you have William Shatner and his shirt. In X-Men, it's always Storm. It seems like a little bit of Logan. Logan runs around naked a lot. Okay. So let's do this, guys, because this is going to crack you up. This is going to crack you up, right? X-Factor, as you can see, I have the one I bought off the stands, and one is a upgrade. But we have Atlantis Attacks. In the middle of all this, they, by the time we got to the summer, after all this Inferno stuff, they were doing their, traditional annuals crossovers. And this one was Atlantis Attacks, right? It went from book to book. But at the same time, we had an Inferno fall. And like I said, this was pretty good. John Byrne and Walt Simonson did it. And it's really, I must go down to the sea again, right? So I can't remember this. This is an Atlantis attack story. So we're going to skip through that. But it's John Byrne writing, drawing, Walt Simonson inking him. In the midst of this, we get they're getting ready to set up for, I believe it was Acts of Vengeance, if you remember that crossover. But anyway, we get a story by Ralph Macchio with fantastic art by John Byrne, where we have Magneto and Dr. Doom talking, setting things up, talking philosophy. Then we finally get back here to the story that I remember turning the page and flipping out. But we got Inferno Aftermath. That is not the Blues Brothers, even though we know it's the Blues Brothers, right? That is Jake and Elwood, right? These are FBI agents that are here to investigate the mass hallucination that took place over the summer across New York. They want answers. So they kind of go through and they talk to people. And some people are, you just got to read this. J. Jonah Jameson pops up. They interview all sorts of people. I mean, they're saying everything but we're on a mission from God. And Jim Fern did a fantastic job of drawing them over and over and over. J. Jonah Jameson, everybody's talking about they have gaps in their memory. Are they sure what they saw and what could have happened? I think this is a fantastic, fun little story just because it has the Blues Brothers, so I'm biased. They start talking to the heroes that are cleaning up. They're like, what happened here? How can this be demons? How come, they're just trying to get the facts, only the facts. Thor's running around. And finally, they reference a story that I remembered. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the point here. But they reference a story that they apparently had investigated. And it happened in Captain America 344. And my brother, I believe, was the one. No, I was collecting it at the time, from 332 to 350. And there was a story of the Serpent Society had turned a lot of people into snake people. And they came up and they're saying they used the same gas to make people hallucinate. So they come up with the fact that their facts lead to demon night caused by hypno-ray. Nobody believes it. And ironically, to make sure that the reader knows it did happen, they have one demon running around New York we've never heard or seen from again, who picks the paper up out of the trash because people think it's crap. So after all of that, all the people dying, and it just blows my mind. They're acting like it never happened. It's not even a conspiracy anymore. Nobody would ever talk about it again. I hated that, and I still hate that. I'm telling you, man. Oh, I absolutely hated that. All right, so let's take a minute here. Take a minute here. Let me get a breather because now we're going to have some of the crossover issues, guys. So take this minute to go ahead and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Go ahead and hit the bell. Go ahead and get me on Instagram as Hallermouse. And let's see what we got here. All right, the new Golden Age. Welcome. The new Golden Age is saying hello to Paolo. Gore, The Blues Brothers appeared. Oh my goodness. Well, they are on a mission from God. Exactly. Um, and whenever I like talk about the Blues Brothers, I automatically in my mind spell God, Gawd. So death by crossovers. Yeah. So by this point, when it was all over with, it was kind of funny because if you go back and watch my Crisis show, I talk about how I was all for Crisis and loving it, still love it. Don't get me wrong, when I was 12. But when we got to that final issue and they killed Robin of Earth 2 and the Huntress, I was like, I don't know about this. That was the very moment I thought this might have been a mistake. Well, with this one, with that ending, when that Aftermath came out a few months later and I read that, I thought I was going to throw that book across. You would have thought Booster Gold popped up on the page. You know, Booster Gold's in the Marvel Universe. You would have thought that's what was going on. I didn't throw the book, but the only book I've ever really thrown across the room was Justice League #4 with Booster Gold on, or #3 when he popped up in the last panel. Anyway, I scared my brother when I did it. So when they came up with the idea that this never happened, that's when it blew my mind. And I started forming opinions that would last over the years. I realized Jim Shooter being gone was not a good thing. They're fast and loose, and that's not good story. And if you want to know how I knew at such a young age about what what Jim Shooter was doing, it was in the editorials. There was actually an editorial where he was letting people know that he had talked to. I'll never forget it. I think I had to be like I was probably like 11 or 12, and it was in a Marvel comic. And I just remember the theme of it was like, this is not Burger King. You don't do comics your way. And he actually was talking about how many panels should be on a page and stuff. I felt like we'd seen behind the scenes. And then, of course, there would be people taking shots at Jim Shooter, like in Legends, in the actual comics and stuff, and you could put 2 and 2 together. I never worked for Jim Shooter, but I can definitely tell you the quality was there under his regime. So, I could just imagine the shock of having a boss for some people. I don't know. I wasn't there, but thanks to Jim Shooter coming over and everybody running, which becoming editor in chief, you had people. One of the first things he was going to do, and people knew it was coming, is that if you were a writer, you couldn't be your own editor. Roy Thomas and Marv Wolfman were their own editors and writers, so that's why they took off the DC, and we got things like All Star Squadron, New Teen Titans, and all that led to Infinity Incorporated, Todd McFarlane, Crisis on Infinite Earth. It set a domino effect of a lot of great stuff during the 80s. So it was good. It was good. So do you guys want to look at some of these little crossover events? Because I'm not going to really pop them open. They are what they are. But like I said, this is where the tone shift was in there, right? Some of these I might pop open if I think they're worth it. So let's get back here. Let's see. Working so primitive here. All right. So right here, Chris Claremont, Alan Davis, they come to New York. They have a reason to come to New York. And one of the first things that happens is they get involved in a infested. Yeah, 6 and 7. I got these backwards. Yeah, we'll look at these real quick. So this is, it was real easy to see. Now, I thought it was kind of cool because Excalibur got the banner of Inferno there. Everybody else got the corner box, I do believe. But Alan Davis doing some fantastic stuff on here. An Alice in Wonderland theme villains. But this is just a fantastic book. We get real quick. We get told. Isn't that amazing how there used to be? They need to really bring that back. That you would still get a page to catch you up. So anyway, we get caught up with what's going on in New York, and we kind of know where this story takes place without being able to really tell, because basically. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This was a lot of humor in this book. There's Kitty Pryde finding herself in a dressed as a baby. But to get things going, you have Megan the Shapeshifter, who's more of a creature of nature, if you will. Brian Braddock is Captain Britain, Nightcrawler. They're a team. I'm trying to get to the point. But anyway, what kind of happens is Kitty ends up having the Soul Sword, and they decide to go to New York, and they get jumped by all the demons, and they get enchanted, and they get a hold of Phoenix. Megan, who feels energy around her, she's real susceptible to like the vibe of a room. She goes full-blown Bride of Frankenstein demon with Nasty there, right? And all this happens without them ever meeting the X-Men or X-Factor. Okay, that's what I'm saying. This is on the side. And they've trapped Rachel, the most powerful one, the Phoenix, as a mannequin. And then we get all the, like I said, cartoon cars coming at him. I mean, I was thinking full Ralph Bakshi, man. You know what I mean? I mean, I felt like I was. And then we get, some funny stuff with Captain Britain. He ends up getting Freddy Krueger's claws, Rambo's outfit, and we get we kind of get told a few things there that's humorous. And like I said, this little nasty demon is going to uh, marry Rachel. And we got Megan being the demon queen, absolutely. And we finally get the soul sword on Kitty Pryde. Chris Claremont had Elenia had died before at the hands of the Beyonder. We'll put it that way. But this is what I'm saying, man. We got a bunch of slasher films coming out where they're enchanted, reenacting a lot of things, a lot of commentary about horror movies here. Kitty Pryde is a cheerleader running from the slasher, Jason, all of them, Rambo, they're all monsters. And then we have, like I said, all the anthropomorphic mechanical stuff of the city fighting them. Like I said, it's all fun. It's all fun, but like I said, it ends up not happening. You know what I mean? Like, nobody believes it happened. I guess the heroes do, but they all come out in the end, right? Cloak and Dagger were in there because they are, at the end of the day, mutants. They were triggered. Their mutant powers were triggered by an illegal experimental drug, so of course you got to have them in there. Well, I didn't know this was in here, but Anacita, who had ties to the book, she was editor at one point of the X-Men books with Chris. Of course, she would pull in her Daredevil, and I'll go ahead and show this off. This is my Daredevil. Always, when Anacita took over, there were always ties to the X-Men. There was a 2-part story that involved Wolverine 249. This is right before the fall of the Mutants, so this is year 4. But I have all these books together. Gore and I did a fantastic live stream. And I do say it was fantastic because it is. We do a deep dive. We just did a deep dive into Born Again. So check that out. Just go onto my page and hit the live. But anyway, apparently these are left over from where I had it. That's why I'm so easy to have them. I have these left over from pulling it out of the Daredevil box. Signed by Rick Leonardi. So Daredevil always had ties. But a lot of people, Al Williamson was doing the inks over John Romita Jr. And I'm convinced John Romita Jr.'s dad, who was the art director, was correcting a lot of his artwork, but took a vacuum cleaner and turned it into like a scorpion, like chokehold demon, as he's already, this is the era of Daredevil where he was always mentally unstable, always just on the edge to have a breakdown, right? So he's having a breakdown in this. He's getting choked to death, and he's having flashbacks of Stick, his master, who taught him a lot of things, telling him to get up, sort of like a little bit like Rocky. Meanwhile, Typhoid Mary is walking through Hill's kitchen, loving it. She actually gets Daredevil to the hospital, which amazed me. And he ends up fighting demons. Anacita went full David and Goliath on this, man. An injured Matt Murdock taking on the big boys and stuff, right? And for some reason, right in the middle of this, they had a fill-in issue. But anyway, this is what I'm saying. She tried to go epic with Daredevil in this in Hill's Kitchen. Then apparently I'm missing one issue of Spectacular Spider-Man. So basically you have the return of the Green Goblin and you have the Hobgoblin. They're fighting each other, and the Hobgoblin ends up becoming Demogoblin. He gets possessed by a demon, an outright demon. And strange bedfellows, J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man fighting off the demons together during Inferno. Great Sal Buscema artwork. Oh, here it is. It was Web of Spider-Man that was going on, where we get to see the Hobgoblin get possessed. All right, because, it's New York, and if something's going on in New York, and then these I bought off the stand. At the same time, Spider-Man having 3 different stories going on, apparently. And Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man is convinced that Mysterio did it. He tracks down Mysterio. Todd McFarlane gets in there. Great artwork in these. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. So anyway, Mysterio ends up getting captured, and once he's captured, it still goes on. All the weird creatures. I think he's in front of a library in New York, and it has some lion statues on the steps, and they come to life. Very Narnia-like, Anyway, and then, like I said, we have Green Goblin coming back, fighting the Hobgoblin. and the lizards just running around because, you know, if it's hot and warm, you know, lizards love that. So you had that. Damage Control came in. We'll put that to the side. And this is the very book where I could tell Tom DeFalco being editor-in-chief may not be a great thing. Steve Englehart was doing the Fantastic Four. I finally dropped the book. I don't know, about around issues 3. I think I made it to the 330s, right? This is 322. And man, it was just very lackluster. I'm like, this is the world's greatest magazine. You guys need to come in there. Kang comes in. Like Steve Englehart's still doing his thing here. He's doing a Kang story. He is able to shoehorn in his Mantis, and we're supposed to be going through Inferno at the time. Yeah. So yeah, those are in there. And then Walt Simonson was doing the Avengers, and he did a very weird 10 to 12 issue run, I think, where the Avengers actually disbanded. During Atlantis Attacks, he did a pretty cool annual where we got a bunch of different Avengers. The Beast made it on the team, the Grey Hulk. And Jarvis, the butler, ends up fighting a car with his umbrella, if you will, you know, big transformer, big honking, you know, demon-possessed car, garbage truck or something. And he ends up forming a team of Avengers that leads to the 300th issue. So in the midst of all the Inferno, we get a whole new team of Avengers, and John Byrne ends up taking over the book. Yeah. And then the Power Pack. Now, this was very interesting. Rereading these at 3 in the morning, guys, was very interesting because as I'm getting older, I'm like, now I want to kind of check out the Power Pack. Back then, I think I read 1 or 2 issues of Power Pack, and I was just like, no way, right? But Power Pack was very cool. A lot of people, and I feel like this should be a separate video. Maybe I will, but they represent a very cool thing, right? Right now on the internet, oh, by the way, they were fighting the Boogeyman, okay? The Boogeyman had attacked their home. That's their mom and dad, based on Louise Simonson and Walt Simonson, but it's really not them. But the Boogeyman has ripped through their ceiling and come after the kids in their home and everything during this whole Inferno thing. But anyway, these kids, there's different eras. Right now, everybody is really stuck on the fact of which one came first? 42. The Boogeyman is after him. Look at that cover. Let's get through this, right? Yeah. So I've ended up with quite a few issues of Power Pack, and I actually enjoyed some of them. But John Bogdanove, that's probably how this got in there. He's actually writing and penciling both of these. Okay. So there's different eras, and it's due to fashion, music, and things moving on. Right now, people are stuck on generations. Okay, it's a boomer, it's a Gen X, it's a Gen Z, it's a Gen M, it's a Gen A, or whatever, things like that. But when you break it down, there are certain eras in those generations that I think are reflected, right? From where I grew up in it, 78 to 82 was the rise of video games and handheld electronics, and our clothes were different than the bell bottoms and bad mustaches at the time. They were striped shirts, collars, things that led into the 80s. Things were pretty dark up until about 82 when you had the things like Dark Crystal and Blade Runner and things. And all of a sudden from 83 to 85, you had things like Kate and Allie, and everything went pastel colors and big bows, right? And then from 86 to 89, things went black and got darker and darker again, right? And I'm speeding through there if you're there during the eras. So it was wild to see this comic from 1980 with its purples and blues and dark tones, you know, and its warm colors and everything. Then all of a sudden, these kids felt very dated when they popped out in their 1984 pastel costumes. You know what I mean? I mean, look at that. Look at that. You see what I'm saying? It's just so wild. It's so wild. It was like, you know, I saw the Song Remains the Same movie, and I remember listening to some commentary, and they were talking about how it was a recorded concert of Led Zeppelin from a year or two before it actually came out, and they said they looked weirdly dated just from like 73 to 75, and that's what this felt like. I mean, you know, put these side by side, I guess, you know what I mean? Even Captain America was wearing black. We had Dark Knight Returns. It was the era of Alan Moore and Frank Miller. And then all of a sudden these kids come out in their pastels. You know what I mean? 1984 forever. It's what it felt like. I got a kick out of that. So let's take a look at this Damage Control, because I haven't read this since it came out. Damage Control was a book, a 2 mini-series that came out where it's a company that gets hired to go in and clean up after superheroes during a big fight if they leave dangerous items around. So basically, I guess they have to do the cleanup of Inferno. I haven't read this in forever, but it had its cast of characters. I don't know. This might be a waste of time. But anyway, yeah, the X-Men appear. Groucho Marx and them appear. That's probably Warlock playing around, being silly. So yeah, we see the aftermath of this, of how they're cleaning up and dealing with the X-Men and everybody acting all funny. See what I'm saying about the regime of Tom DeFalco? It felt like, it really feels like things were not being taken serious, right? So guys, that's Inferno, and that is us just flapping around. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm kind of looking for somebody to do Age of Apocalypse with. I had 2 people in mind. After getting to talk to them, I figured out one more or less was reading Wikipedia, and the other one probably read 1 or 2 issues. You don't have to be a expert on it, but you know, you got to have read some of the issues. So I'm going to put off the Age of Apocalypse thing for the guys coming in late. If you saw me reschedule a show a week or 2 ago, whenever it was, because I couldn't make it, it was a good thing, because I would have had 2 people on here that had no idea what they were talking about. It could have been a disaster. So if you're interested in Age of Apocalypse for its 30th anniversary, get a hold of me within the next week or something through Instagram. We'll talk a little bit and just have a fun show about it, maybe a deep dive if you want to do it. Make sure you're subscribed, thumbs up and everything, in case Gore and I do something, Paolo and I do something, or I just do something here. Let's see what we got here. We got some Power Pack talk. Oh, we got some good stuff here. All right, here we go, guys. Hold on. This is going to be some good stuff. Oh, my mother. That's awesome. Okay, Walt Simonson did good incorporating the Avengers into the Inferno crossover. Other writers, not so much. Okay, and if you do a lot of that reading and looking at them, I got you. Crossover wise, I really wasn't that disappointed with most of them, if you know, but I did like Anacita's take. It's more like a nightmare happening to Daredevil instead of reality. Yeah, it got very surreal, very nightmare. That's what I was talking about, the tones through the book. One book's got Calvin and Hobbes popping up. This one's got Daredevil near death, wrapped up in bandages, fighting, you know, through hell. You know, Doug Munch in an interview suggested Shooter contributed to Gene Day's death at 31. Oh my gosh. I think it was the reason he was fired by Shooter. Dave Sim and Cerebus wrote an editorial. It was even harder. Gotcha. I think it was the reason he was fired by Jim Shooter. Dave Sim and Cerebus wrote an editorial. It was even harder. I need to look at that. I got most of those floppies. Getting into comic book history here, guys. Nasita did her best, Paolo. I was really annoyed when Inferno became a part of Matt and Karen's story. Born Again discussion with Tim was enlightening for me. I'm still thinking about our discussion, especially with there being no corpse. I know what you're talking about. The Matt Christ, Karen Page, Mary Magdalene. It was great. Yeah, there's a scene I'm wondering about it after Matt went after the Kingpin after he imagined whooping his ass. If I could put it that way, he gets there and not so much. Kingpin hands him off, and then we turn the page and there's a taxi, old-fashioned like Will Eisner looking checkered cab, you know, taxi, off of the edge of a dock, and Matt Murdock was supposed to be in there and he wasn't, and I always kind of wondered if that was you know, subtext with the story of Jesus not being in the cave after 3 days, because there's a scene where Kingpin just says no body. There was no body. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Definitely check that out. It's nothing like this this Gonzo review of Inferno. It's very cool. I remember liking the artwork in the early issues of Power Pack. Who was it again? June Brigman. That was June Brigman. Yep, there we go. June Brigman before John. John did some good stuff on that book. Who else worked on it? See if they, yeah. Brigman, like Hilary Barta and Brett Blevins, is one of those artists not appropriate to superheroes that had to make do in the market, but her efforts were appreciated. I really like Brigman's artwork, Paolo. I never saw her work again, not even in independent comics. I think I'm not going to say too much. Some of those artists like Brigman and a little bit, I know people are going to flip out on me, a little bit of Colleen Doran and, oh my God. Anyway, there's two or three of them that I kind of like. I saw June Brigman do like, I think a New Mutants annual here and there, I think, or something. She popped up here and there. I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up working on gift cards. They brought her back for a Power Pack revival attempt in the 2000s. I'll ask Jared to ask Wheezy about June Brigman. Oh, that'd be cool. Message me if you don't care, Paolo, when you do that. I'm glad you did this. Like I said, you made the crossover interesting. It took 40 years, but hey, yeah, you know. And in 3 panels, 3 days, and it's 3 panels, 3 days in a cave. That's right. We started, the number 3 popped up with the 3 times Daredevil fell, like Jesus fell carrying the cross. We started seeing things like that. It was a great deep dive. All right, guys, that is Inferno. That is the Gonzo review. If you are in the future, don't do it now. Don't do it now. Okay, not in the live chat, but if you are watching in the future in the upload, if you have a crossover, a book or something you would like me to do, like a Gonzo review of this, or even slow down and do a deep dive, put it in the comments. Make sure you are subscribed, thumbs it up, like it. Thanks for spending this very cold, in my area, very cold. We're getting another winter cold snap coming here pretty soon. Thanks for spending it with me. I look like I'm in some third world country in a cave right now, so I'm glad we could do this. And everybody be excellent to each other. Thanks for everybody that popped in. Thanks for everybody that's up front, front and center in the comments. That's what makes this so much fun. Getting immediate comments and feedback and ideas and comic talk. So make sure that you thumb it up, share it, like it, go to Instagram, hit me up on Instagram, message me there. And I don't know, there might be a comic talk tonight where I kind of look at maybe I'll talk about the Neil Gaiman thing, or maybe even Diamond Distributor. I've been talking to Josh and Anderson, through text and stuff about it, and a few other people. So there may be a show tonight. I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock. So make sure you hit that bell when you subscribe. All right, guys, read your comics. Everybody be excellent to each other. Have a great day.